My name is Tim, and I'm a woodaholic. I've tried all sorts of remedies, origami, cross-stitching. I've even tried Hungarian shortbread baking, but nothing worked. So I've had to come back to this. I've done lots of things, as we all have, and I'm sure we all share this passion. And so hopefully we'll get on. Simple mechanical fixing at the top, which I've already made. That's a single piece top, and on this side it's drilled in counterboard. I'm going to put number 10 screws in. Anyone know what size the heads are? No, you don't you need to. Well, it's just about 10 mil. So if you use a 10.5 mil drill, should be okay. The shanks are about 5 mil, so that's about 5.2. Because they're old imperial size, this is nothing equates it. I think something Dramble will probably say something like a letter Q drill would suit it, but I don't have letter drills, but it'll be some odd size. Anyway, so to get around it, we'll just do it near enough. We'll start with the big hole first. Any ideas why? Well, it's easier to put a small hole in a big one than a big hole in a small one, unless you use a step drill. Try and get this a bit straight. I'm using the shadow of the light to help me line it up. You can use a mirror or all sorts of clever little tricks. Test will now open. I'll tell you when you need to put hearing protection on. Okay, top. We're going to do now, I'm going to stick some legs on it. So now that we've got the legs positioned, we just put a little adhesive on the end grain. Normally you don't get a great deal of adhesion on the end grain, but with modern glues you will get some. And it's better than nothing, it just helps to do that. Obviously the best glue adhesion is on the side grain or the face grain. That'll help. Get it nice and even with the brush. So we've drilled our top with our 10.5mm holes in the top for the plugs and the 5.5mm clearance holes for the number 10 screws, which we have here. Using 75mm screws with a Robertson head, and 5.5mm gives us clearance through there. Screws mechanical fixing create the joint through friction. So what they do is, as you screw them in, the screws engage and then pulls the two parts together, the top part pulling against the lower part, and the force of them pulled together provides a friction fit between the two. So it's important that the screws go through, allow that to pull through. If they don't pull through, there's a possibility that the screw will lift off and we won't be able to pull the top part completely tight against the lower half. There are some modern screws which have a special cutting flute in them, which will produce, as you screw them in, their own bored hole, which allows that to happen. But these are just common or garden screws. They've slightly been relieved to help out so we need to make sure we drill them the correct size for that clearance. Now we're going to set the legs up in the orientation that we want. We want to get the legs square, so what we have a little simple fixture here. You can make this yourself by screwing a rail on the back of your bench. Here I've got some pegs, I've just pushed that on, and this is the reference edge at the back, which I'm going to push the legs back to. To maintain the correct spacing front and back, I've cut some little spacers. This is just out of scrap MDF, and so there's a front and a back spacer that holds the legs parallel. To give us a offset from the edge, I put a reference fence here. Once again, you could put that on there. I put a 25mm packer down there, and that offsets from this reference face to the leg 25mm. To lift the leg up, to give it the offset from the other side, I've got a piece of 20mm, which is a piece of I think it's fascia, which is about 20, it might be 19, but it's about 19 or 20, which gives a little bit of lift. So when we put the top on, which we do there, we've got the 3. Before we put the top on, we then push the top against the reference face, so therefore we know that this leg is 25mm from there, and that the leg is 30mm up from there, and that the legs are square. To push them back, I'm using sliding wedges or fox wedges. For those of you who want some, I've got a box here. Just take some on the way out. I've plenty there. If anyone needs any more, I'll cut some more. They're very useful, sliding parallel wedges. So we put those in the side, and that allows us to push and the beauty of these is they provide a parallel action. So that's pushed that forward onto there. Push that a little bit more. Push those back there, and then to push the front back, we're going to use these little fox wedges in the front, and that's going to push the front or the seat back against the legs. Now we're sure that that's nice and firm. Now we're ready to put the pilot hole, the screw thread. Because we're screwing quite a long way into end grain, it's always best to put a little pilot hole in. And to do that, we just need a couple of drills, so we'll just do that. Now we're going to put our screws in. Because we said we're going into end grain, we'll need to do a little pilot hole into the end grain. To get the pilot hole started, I like to just put a little dab from the clearance hole just to start, and that helps to center the pilot hole. It also helps to relieve any of the grain that might pick up as the screw goes in. Now we're going to use our 3mm long drill as the pilot hole for the thread for the screw. So we're going to pop the screws in. So I'll just get the screws, slide them in. And I'm going to screw these up with an impact driver. But if you don't have an impact driver, these normal drill drivers set to screws and a fairly high torque setting will do. As the impact driver is a little noisy, I'm going to put my ear defenders on. Same as last time. Just going to do a little bit of it. So that's the legs fixed simply. It's also reasonably flat. So the next thing we want to do is to fill these holes. There's several ways we can do that. We can put these little plugs in, which I've drilled. You can just tap a little bit of adhesive and tap those in and flush those off. So we've got our screws in, obviously a little unsightly. So there's a couple of ways of finishing this off. The simplest way is just to use a little pine filler. Just pop that. So these, if you recall when we drill these a little bit shallower, not as deep as the ones we had on this side, which we drove in because we were going to put plugs in those. So little pine filler, just pop that in. Using a little palette knife to get it right in. Just do this side with it. This particular product's a water-based product, so if it gets a little dry, you can just pop a little water in it and freshen it up again. If it's a really deep hole, you may have to visit this again because there's a limit of how deep you can put the filler in. But we'll put this in for now and look at it later. Because the figuring on the top is not just plain pine, we can actually embellish that a little. And using these coloured pencils, we find some browns and some reds and some different colours. There's a dark brown there. And when the filler's a little bit drier, we can just fill a little bit in to make it match a little closer. It's never going to be put on, but at least it doesn't stick out with two light coloured circles. So that's a little way of making that a little less visible. Just go that. Plugs. I have some plugs which I've drilled in a piece of scrap wood, and I select which ones, how the grain goes. And I've already popped some of those out, and we can pop those in the deeper holes. So we just pop these. The beauty of these is that these have been cut on the face grain, so therefore the plugs will have face grain on them. People say, why couldn't you use dowels? Well, the problem with dowels is they're cut and it shows end grain, and that really does stand out. So at least having face grain is a little bit better. And just to secure these, we're just going to put a spot of adhesive on them. I'm going to pop that in. And we do the same with all the holes. And when these are dry, well, I'll just put these in and I'll just tap them in with a little mallet. Try and select a bit of grain, so that one's going to go sort of that way. I've had the plugs in for a while and the glue's just about gone off, so now we can saw off these plugs and finish the job off. What I've done is I've clamped it onto a little bench here, put the 20mm spacer underneath there, just a spacer there, and I put a clamp through just to hold it firm. Any way you hold it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to cut this off with a flush cut saw, a Japanese pull saw, and we'll just pull that off. So that brought it down. We're going to run over this with the block plane or the sander after us, so we'll do the same for the others. Try not to mark the top. So we've got it just a little bit proud there. That one's pretty swift, just a tiny bit there and a little bit on this inside one there. So I'm just going to take the top off. With the block plane. By skewing the plane, it just slices it. Right, so we've got it pretty flush there. I'm just going to give it a lick over with a sander. I normally start with 80. I used to start at 100, but then I'd get all the way to 180 and I'd find I got a ding somewhere, so I had to go back away. So what I've done now is, although that is pretty flat and smooth, I'm going to start with a bit of 80. And then before I go too far, I just normally like to just give it with a very soft pencil, just a little wavy. This gives me an indication of where we're sanding, or more important, where we're not sanding. Now that helps to keep the base flat. Although I do have a hard pad on here. These are replaceable pads, and this particular one is a hard one. This is the blue one, so that helps to keep a nice flat face. So we'll just give that a lick over more. You'll notice that I was going across the grain, which is something which most people might wince at. Although with the modern, fully random audible sanders, it doesn't matter which way, whether you go along or across, because the action is completely random. So whether you're pushing the sander along or across the grain doesn't seem to matter. So I can feel that's 80 finish, and that's brought that flat. So I'm going to change the papers now. We'll go to 100 or 120, and then we'll just finish that off. So we've just finished that off down to 240, and that's really smooth. Really quite pleased the way the plugs have come out. You may need a little bit of touching up on there, but this is basically pretty good. It's a utility stool, it's with screws, and it'll give us good service. You can finish with anything you have. Polyurethane varnish would do, or some whatever varnish or finishes. Traditionally, stools, when they were made, were painted green. can paint them, whatever you want to do. So there we go. In the next session, we'll be talking about other mechanical fasteners, and we'll be making a stool similar to this. But instead of using screws into legs, we're going to use pocket holes, and that's in the next session. Hope you got something from it.